Who is Caroline Ingraham, please?
Caroline Ingraham is a person who is passionate about helping those who don't have a voice, so animals who don't have a voice, and finding out, allowing them to heal themselves with self-medication. So basically, Caroline Ingraham is passionate about alleviating suffering, and so many animals can't tell us what's wrong with them, and they can't tell us what the problem is. And I found a way that we can have a shared language with these animals, and we can get a pretty good idea why their behavior is as it is. And very often when there's a behavioral change or there's a behavioral problem, it's because there's something underlying that's physical. Even though the animal may look really, really healthy, they're choosing physical essential oils. When I say physical, I mean essential oils like garlic, to inhale if it's a dog or a cat, or maybe to ingest if it's a herbivore, or they're selecting fennel or peppermint. So those are sort of the physical ones. And then it gives you a lot of information. Are they selecting remedies for their gut, or are they selecting remedies for pain? Or are these remedies that keep coming up time and time again when an animal has tumors or cancer? They're always selecting this group of remedies. And then it's even more individualized. So looking at all of us as an individual, I found a group of remedies that will, for example, work with the gut or pain or whatever the condition may be, the kidneys, urinary, and then it's matching that to the individual. And then the individual will dose themselves precisely. And it really works. It's amazing. Dosage is key. You're halfway there when you've got the right oil, but getting the correct dose, and you just see amazing results. But it's not always easy to know what's a yes and what's a no, because sometimes an oil is very often missed. I've just got a video out there called all about Tom, and Tom's got tumors in his mouth. And if he munches on bones, they bleed, and if they're removed, they usually grow back again. They do remove them when they cause a lot of pain. But Tom selected thuja as his main oil. But when I offered, first of all, he selected lime. He had a few yawns. He went up onto the sofa, and he had a little bit of lemon, wasn't interested anymore, barked at the window. Somebody would think, okay, he's a little bit interested in essential oils, but not fully. But because we needed to get the correct one to really work in with what he had already selected, which was the lime and the lemon. So when we got thuja, and she opened, because I was working via Zoom, so when Tracy opened the cap, Tom came in and held it for 2 seconds? And then showed no further interest. So I told Tracy to put the cap back on. Just watch Tom. Within seconds, Tom went into his bed. He then went into deep sleep for 25 minutes. Tom continued to select thuja as his main oil, bergamot as his second. He also had heart murmurs, and bergamot's good for heart murmurs, and lemon, and as his third main choice. And after 1 week, all the tumors in his mouth had turned from bright red, sort of crimson sort of color to light pink. After 5 weeks, they had reduced to half the size. He was 6 years old, and she could see teeth for the first time since he was a 2-year-old in 5 weeks. And that could have easily been missed. It could have looked like, oh, he's not interested in essential oils. He's had a few sniffs. He's got up and he's barking at the window. And that one little sniff, you wouldn't think that it could have such a profound effect. But we're looking at these aromatic chemicals, almost like an invisible gas that's being breathed into the body. And like any other gas, you know, it can be pretty potent.
Wow. Can I ask, how did you start on your journey to get where you are today?
Okay, the journey began a very, very, very long time ago. And when I was in my very early 20s, maybe even late teens, I realized that you had to look after yourself in this life. When I say look after yourself, I mean look after your own health. I had been prescribed some medication. I'm not somebody who ever really takes medication, but the one time I got prescribed something, it was the wrong medication. And, you know, it could have, if I had continued to take it, it could have had detrimental effects because it was taken off the market. I didn't even need it. You know, and he kept saying, do you mind taking it? And I thought, that's a strange thing to say. You know, if it's going to do the problem, I think it was just, you know, some slight swelling somewhere, you know, and I thought, oh yeah, you go to the doctor for that. You don't, you know, so yeah, and I was horrified, you know, it's just like, you know, that it was taken. And my friend had said, oh my gosh, you know, you seem really strange on this medication. And I thought, yeah, I'm not going to take it. And that was the last time pretty much I ever took medication again, other than antibiotics, which I've taken, which is another story. So I thought, you know, you've got to, and this is the first time I've told anyone this, gone back this far. So I realized that, you know, you've got to really look after your own health. And I needed to understand more about health. So I went to a college to learn about essential oils. You know, I was on the underground in London, and I picked up a magazine and I thought, this sounds quite healthy and interesting. And I think I'll go on this course. And so I enrolled on the course. And Tisserand was our teacher. I was what, 24 then. So that was in 1984. And I was one of the youngest on the course. And everybody knew who Tisserand was. And I thought, I had no idea who Tisserand was. And he was our teacher there. And anyway, I was a little bit skeptical, you know. And then he said, and then I had cystitis. Now, I would get cystitis if I looked at a cup of coffee, almost, you know, a glass of wine. You know, it was my bête noire in life, was cystitis. So and I said, look, I've got to leave. Because if I don't get my remedies, then I will end up, if I don't get antibiotics, it goes to my kidneys and I end up in hospital. I had tried everything. I had tried herbs, I had tried acupuncture, and the only thing that worked was antibiotics. So anyway, but they were taking longer and longer to work. So anyway, he said, oh great, we can use you as a guinea pig. So, you know, he put me on the table and he muscle tested me, and I responded to juniper, yarrow, and sandalwood. And he massaged them onto my kidneys, my back area, you know, on my back. And I thought, wow, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like somebody just erasing out the pain. And then I thought, I wasn't quite sure if he was the healer or if it was the oils. So I wasn't quite convinced who was who at this point. And or what was doing what. And anyway, next day I came back into college and he said, how are you feeling? And I said, yeah, great. No more pain on my back, but I still feel it's kind of there. And he said, well, put some in a glass of water, you know, a couple of drops of juniper. And I did. And it lifted until I was 45. So I never got cystitis again. Thank goodness I trained in the days before the red tape. Thank goodness before everybody said you can't do this, you can do that. That has to be 2.5% dilution. And the essential oils got so wrapped up that it was taking this wonderful medicine away from us. You know, and it's so much better to be working with natural medicine than when you can, of allopathic medicine, because natural medicine is spinning. It spins to the left, and that's really spinning within our body. And it's working with all the receptors to harmonize our body, you know, providing we have the correct dose. It's not spinning, doing a right spin, which can go against the grain in our body and maybe cause, you know, side effects. So I'm so grateful that I trained before the red tape and all the do's and don'ts came with the essential oil, because I think if I hadn't, I wouldn't have grown as much as I have with the knowledge I have, and secondly, I might have lost a kidney by now because I would have gone antibiotics because it wasn't working. It wasn't strong enough through the skin. It needed to flush through my body. So it taught me that if it's an internal problem with a herbivore, then very often, if it tastes nice, it might need to be in the blood to flush through. So, so then I began working with my father, who had diverticulitis, and he was going to have part of his colon removed, and still training. And I said, well, let's see if it works for you. And so I muscle tested him because and then I offered him, he responded to peppermint and lavender. So I don't know when it came to me that you're meant to work with taste and smell, because we weren't taught it at college. But I got him to smell the peppermint and he loved it. And I got him to smell the lavender and he loved it. So I put a few drops in two different glasses of hot water. And I got him to take them and take as much as was pleasant to him. And he loved them. So he would sip away at his peppermint and sip away at his lavender. And he was previously bleeding every day. And he bled once, 3 days later, 10 days later, and his colon repaired itself. And I was blown away with the effect it had on me, and then the effect it had on my father. So I was thinking, okay, it's the oils that are the healers, because it's them that's doing the work. And anyway, so, and then I rescued a dog from Battersea Dogs Home who was very poorly, and I thought, I wonder if it works for dogs as well. And it did, but she was more wanting frankincense for fear. She was very fearful. She hadn't eaten when she was in Battersea. And in those days, which ages ago, you could take a dog home, if they weren't 100%. And it had on her cage, this dog hasn't eaten pretty much since she's been there 7 days, and you're allowed to rehome them after 7 days. You were allowed to. And anyway, so I took her home. It'd be easy to get her to eat, and nope, she wouldn't eat. And then the vet said, why did you choose such a sick dog? And I said, she's so sweet, because she was a German Shepherd dog. And it was just frankincense. And I was thinking, how should I begin with frankincense? She was enjoying smelling it. So I thought, should I work it a little bit like how you do with humans? And I put some in some oil and on her belly, and she got up, and ate her food. And I thought, oh my goodness, I wanted to tell the world about what I considered miracles in bottles. I thought, these are medicines, and they're amazing. And if you get the right dose and the right medicine, or medicinal plant, should I say, to that individual, then what can be achieved is absolutely incredible, and many times has been life-saving. So, but the world wasn't ready. This is a long time ago. It took a long time, actually, for the world to be ready. So then I found myself going over to California, and I married an American, and I had a young child. He was only 6 weeks old when we immigrated, and I found myself living in horse country. And I spent several years there just researching what horses selected for different problems. And then I began to collate a lot of information from that. And, if there was stomach ulcers, then they would very often choose German chamomile. If they had suffered a loss, then they would very often select neroli. If they were injured, yarrow. And I began to collate a lot of information about horses. And it was very easy with horses, because if there was an internal problem, they'd very often take it by mouth. And if they needed it really quickly into the blood, they would use it underneath of their tongue. And then if they wanted to alternate the speed, they would use underneath, top, with the same oil. And then another oil, that same horse might just use the top of the tongue, meaning it will go into the blood slower because it's very rich in its vascular supply under the tongue. And then another oil they might just want to inhale, and maybe that's a behavioral oil that, as you know, when an oil's inhaled, it goes straight to the limbic system, and so that's the fastest route to the brain. So they knew exactly how to take the oil. So what great teachers! And very often, if they wanted it topically, they would, turn around, and I think, really, do you want to hear? Or they would put their head down, and then it evolved from there. And then dogs too. My dog got, a lot of people know the story, so I won't go too deeply into it, but my dog who got bitten by a rattlesnake, and carrot seed essential oil saved her life. And she was dying, and her blood count, I took her obviously to the vet. Her neck was out here, and her blood count was 45 by the time I got her to the vet, and it's meant to be 200. And he said, let's put her on the drip, or let's put him on the drip all night, or I'm going to put him on the drip and see how he is in the morning. He hadn't responded to the drip. And sorry, it was 70 when he got to the vet, 45 in the morning, so he hadn't responded. We brought him home and he was dying. I couldn't do self-selection because he was losing consciousness. Blood was coming out of his nose. They died from internal bleeding. So I took the information from the horses and knew that when there was cell damage, then very often carrot seed was selected. So put that in a capsule with some olive oil so it wouldn't irritate his throat. I had enough. I could choose to offer him frankincense and help him, leave this world and detach, or I could see if he, first of all, try and see if we could save his life. So I offered the capsule. Well, I didn't offer. I got him to swallow it because he wasn't conscious enough to offer. And almost immediately, the blood coming out of his nose went to a slow drip. Now, this happened every 4 hours. And each, the drip would begin to build up 4 hours later, but not as bad as the onset. So every 4 hours, I gave him a capsule that had some carrot seed in it and oil. And by the morning, there was any traces of blood around the kitchen. He was standing up. He was staggering, but he was, I knew he would live. And within 3 days, he was totally back to health. He was a young dog. And then that made me want to research dogs and how they heal themselves. And that was much more difficult because they're omnivores. So they don't generally take oils by mouth, and they don't take a lot of plants by mouth. So it was a really, it was quite a long and complex journey to really understand how to bring a dog back to health from all sorts of illnesses, from, bacterial problems to, you name it, cancers, if they need to ingest it or if it needs to be in their blood with that stronger dose, where do we go? And then I found out that often they wanted it via the femoral artery, but that's a whole new subject. The subject is so huge that I could easily go off on one tangent and talk about that for ages. But yeah, so, and looking at the research on carrot seed that I found that starlings line their nests with it, and that when scientists looked into this further, that when they removed the carrot seed leaves from the nest, they found that the chicks had lower hemoglobin levels, suggesting they had greater blood loss. So the starlings were using it, to prevent blood loss. And then when I went to a scientific conference in Cardiff, I was saying to one of the guys there, one of the doctors, what do you think was going on with the carrot seed? Was it coagulating the blood, or was it its effect on the liver? And he said it was the effect on the liver. So it's the carotol in the carrot seed that had that effect. It's amazing, but it has taken a long time. It's taken years and years and years, but now I feel, I would say from about 10 years ago, I would feel it's taken that long, probably about 20 years to really understand and research how a dog heals itself for a multitude of physical and behavioral problems. And I feel pretty confident now.
You know, I am in awe of you. I mean, like, I know I've said it before, but you're amazing. You're such a pioneer. And I'm just trying to imagine what was it like for you back then, as a lady, a woman, doing this essential oil thing, which I think most people will think is kind of flu, you know.
Exactly.
And how did you cope? I mean, like, was there a lot of resistance with you, you know, even trying to experiment and learn through observation and you know, with different animals, and it's a lot of observational work that you're doing, because just listening to how you talk about the horses, you know, using their tongue up and down the palate. I mean, like, wow. I mean, like, I don't think I'm observant enough to grasp that little nuances and to watch them. And I'm just trying to imagine what you were like, just, you know, like, really like staring at the horse's mouth, literally, you know. I mean, it takes a lot of, it takes so much concentration and passion, you know. And I don't know what drove you. I mean, what drives you to do what you do?
I think it's what's amazing when you see an animal heal itself. And the driving force is to alleviate suffering. And to think that there might be an animal who's perhaps been spayed and they've got an inflammatory bladder condition, but actually it's not diagnosed because there's no infection. And also we all know that the markers for infection can vary, you know, between individuals. Everything is standardized as a mean sort of standard where everything is conducted for the people or the animals that fall in that middle of the road, not either side. So we all know people as well who are suffering, but it comes up as negative in the testing because they don't fall into the average sector with the readings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah, people's temperatures are different, for example. You know, some people have lower temperatures, some have higher temperatures, you know, and it's not always everything comes up as a positive or a negative when it's tested. So, for example, inflammatory bladder, it's quite difficult to know if an animal's got an inflammatory bladder condition if there's no infection. And sometimes, you know, there may be some infection there, but it comes out negative, perhaps because it's caused by E. coli. We've already got E. coli in the body. So if there's an overpopulation in the microbiome of E. coli, then it's going to cause sort of a cystitis, really. And it's not always obvious with animals because some animals urinate a lot or it's difficult to see blood in the urine. But either way, you can ask the animal, you know, is there a problem here? Do you have an inflammatory response? Yeah, so do you need anything for inflammation because you're offering an anti-inflammatory to that dog and it's wanting it, and then you offer it to the abdomen, for example, and if they want it applied topically, they will present themselves and they will begin to mouth and close their eyes, and if they don't, they will you know, close their legs or not, you know, walk away. So they're never held. You know, there's no, you know, I'm holding on to you and I'm going to put this on you and see if you like it. You can't see if they like it because you've held on to them. So you've got to show them what you're going to do. And then you go to the bladder area, for example, and if they want it, they stand and they look so soothed when you apply some, for example, on the bladder. I'll give you a case. I was working with a dog, Molly. Molly is not an abused dog. She's a very much loved dog who was, you know, had never, you know, she wasn't from a rescue home. And, she was so fearful. She couldn't deal with rain. Certainly not thunder, lightning, gunfire. She would be beside herself with any of that. I don't know if you saw this one on one of my webinars, but it was just the smallest amount of sandalwood that she wanted over her bladder area, but there was no signs that there was a bladder problem. But there must have been something, because she wouldn't have wanted it applied on the bladder, and her behavior wouldn't have changed after it was applied. And it began to rain as I was working with her through Zoom, and she got a little bit anxious. And when she got a little bit anxious, that's going to lower the immune system. And so she wanted a little bit more, and that was it. And I think she selected sandalwood for another 2 or 3 days. And now for the first time, she could deal with fireworks. And normally she'd have to be on sedation for fireworks and drugs, and that barely worked either. She was in such a state. Just the smallest amount of sandalwood topically over her bladder. And that's because when an animal isn't feeling 100%, then they feel much more fearful, they feel vulnerable, and their behavior begins to change. And that's sort of like us too, when we're not feeling great, our behavior begins to change. Perhaps we get a bit more irritable, perhaps we feel not so confident, perhaps we feel a little bit more needy. And it's no different with animals. So it's really important to check the physical body to see if there is any discomfort. Do they have a headache? Loads of animals want pain relief in between their shoulder blades or on the neck. And then they're sleeping in a really deep sleep, maybe for an hour, maybe for 2 hours. It's amazing what can be achieved. And we're asking them, they've got their own medicine cabinet that is at home, and you don't have to let the condition escalate till it gets so bad they've got to go and have medication. You can nip it in the bud when you see something change by offering them different remedies to give them the opportunity to bring themselves into health. And it seems so unfair that we're allowed to have our pharmacy, but the animal's not. And we've taken the animal out of its environment, we've put them in our homes, and we give them no say at all. We give them, they have to have whatever we put on them, even if it's from the pet store. Oh yeah, this skin gel is, that's got good reviews. Let's slap this tea tree skin gel on them. It might not be suited to them. Just like, some people aren't suited to turmeric, and some people aren't suited, and others are. And same with garlic, or, we all have a different gene structure within the DNA, and we're going to be suited to slightly different components to bring us back into health and at an individual dosage. So this way, the individual knows what component they need by smell and taste, and at what dosage to bring themselves back into health. Because as soon as it's not needed, like the cat I was telling you about, as soon as the cancer had disappeared, then the cat no longer showed any interest in lime oil. And then I've noticed that lots of animals with intestinal tumors will select lime oil. And then when I do the scientific research on lime, it actually inhibits blood supply to tumors. So that was the fascinating thing, was that, from all of the research I did, observational research, I then looked at the pharmacology behind the plants and the science behind the whole, the work I was doing. And it matched exactly what the animals were selecting. So, yarrow inhibits COX-2 enzymes, which is the inflammatory response at the site of the injury. So I didn't know there was that science on it when I originally offered it to the horses and saw that they were selecting it. So it was really exciting to see the science was backing up what these animals were selecting. And I have such a huge portfolio of all the different species, of how they take remedies, how they dose themselves with them, and what they take to bring themselves back into health, that it's amazing that more hasn't been taken on board in the scientific communities. But having said that, I just got my first mention in a peer review phytoveterinary journal by Professor Hoffman. So that was very exciting. But in the early days, going back to your question, it was really difficult. It was really on my own, and there was no one else doing it. And because I was using the essential oils in an unconventional way, then I got a lot of slack. I got a lot of irate aromatherapists, not forgetting that I've studied aromatherapy. What are you doing using wintergreen, birch, and there's horses taking them by mouth, and but actually, it's finding the science. Wintergreen and birch, to begin with, are less toxic in animals than they are in humans. And on top of that, why not let an animal or a person have a natural pain relief? For saying don't offer wintergreen or birch, you're pushing that individual, or not you, but it's pushing that individual to take pharmaceuticals which don't work in harmony with the body. Why do they do this? Whereas these natural painkillers work in harmony with our taste receptors, with pain receptors, and it's only going to be detrimental if you force the wrong dose on that individual, or if they're taking certain drugs for the heart. But that would apply to aspirin as well, or any other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. So it's just pushing someone from a natural non-steroidal anti-inflammatory to a pharmaceutical one. Why? It amazes me why people do this. And I suppose the same applies, for cats as well. It amazes me that people don't look at the real research of what they're just putting out on the website. So the website very often is based on theory. Essential oils are only going to be detrimental if you overdose a cat, if you overdose a person, if you overdose a dog or a horse. Of course, they're medicinal. They're going to be detrimental. But if you get the dose right and the correct medicinal herbal extract, be it an essential oil, then that works beautifully with that individual to bring them back into health. And all the incorrect information out there is so damaging because it's not allowing animals or cats to be healed. In one case in America, when I was in a class, and this cat wanted desperately to be rehomed, but if you stroked her back, she would swipe at you. And so she couldn't be rehomed, and she couldn't be touched unless it's all around the face. In class, she chose a lot of wintergreen, and she chose a lot. Wintergreen and birch are pretty similar. They're both 98% methyl salicylate, working like a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. So she also chose a lot of German chamomile, which helps support the gut. And they're on pieces of cloth, and she worked with the German chamomile, then the wintergreen, then the German chamomile, and then she fell asleep with her nose by the wintergreen. When she came out of her sort of carrier, it was a sort of a dog carrier that I was working in, she jumped on top. The carer from the rescue centre who was in the classroom stroked her back, she purred. She went around all the class members and they all stroked her back and she purred. She could be rehomed. We've now taken the pain away from her and she can be rehomed. And at the end of the class, I said, what have you learned for today? And guaranteed everybody was in tears saying, oh my God, I hadn't realised. And I think it's actually quite cruel to put the wrong information out there because you're stopping individuals from being healed and you're stopping information and education, or it's not you, but that's being prevented from these poor animals being able to heal themselves. Why not get education? Why not find if you get anodine from the over the counter, you're not going to take a whole packet because you have the education that could poison you, and if your health is compromised, it could kill you. So I think what I struggle with is that people find it really difficult to look at essential oils as medicinal and treat them in the same way. So either they're really dangerous, or in other cases, no, they're just esoteric. But medicine is given the respect and credibility to dosage for dosage. And if you give somebody else's medicine, it could cause a problem. If you overdose, it could cause a problem, be it over the counter or from the doctor. Why can't people see that's the same with essential oils? Instead of just putting, oh, you should never use birch, you should never use them on cats, you should never use garlic. Well, actually, if they looked at the research, they would see how many animals select garlic, and there's a lot of animals that select garlic, from cats to dogs to horses, and it's probably one of the most popular oils along with wintergreen, and it alleviates suffering. I had wintergreen. One horse was going to be put to sleep or put on a year's box rest, and actually that horse took 2 mils of wintergreen by mouth and wanted probably another mil massaged in C4, C5 in his neck, because I go down the neck when I get to the right place. They drop their head, so they keep on going, and no longer dragged his back feet. Immediately afterwards, tail took it still a long time to get back to centre. Went to the vets on the Wednesday. Vet said, gave him the all clear, said perhaps just bring him back in 6 months just to check. It must have, unblocked a nerve, but that saved that horse's life, because it was going to be destroyed. He was only a year old, a yearling, or he would have had to be put in box rest. So it's really important that people look at the data, look at the research. I say to people, when you hear something's poisonous, research it. Is it just something you've heard on a website? Go to Google Scholar and look up and see how many poisonings and what was the dose and how much garlic was given to the animal. Was it given to the animal every day in the food? What was the health of that animal? Did it have a compromised system? And they could have been overdosing their animal on garlic, which might have not been needed on a dog, that had a compromised immune system, for example. None of this information is out there. It's just a blanket, oh, that's poisonous, don't use it. And we wouldn't do that with drugs. Pharmaceuticals, oh, that's poisonous, don't use it. I mean, some people do with some drugs, but, generally, people have much more confidence in drugs, pharmaceuticals, than they do in essential oils. Yet pharmaceuticals haven't been around that long. They're pretty new science. They're generally tested for 2 years. They're generally tested, as I said, on the mainstream sector of people, without others that are falling each side of the boundaries, which could be a bit detrimental to them if they're not, if they're predisposed to having an adverse reaction. So anyway, it's just, that's one thing that I find really difficult to understand, is why people can see it with medicine, but they can't see it with essential oils, and they put a blanket on all essential oils should be 2.5% diluted on the skin. Why? I'm not massaging oils on the skin. Because I can understand an aromatherapist doing that, but this isn't aromatherapy, because an aromatherapist is putting oils on skin that doesn't necessarily need it. Your skin isn't damaged, or, so it's not going to irritate the skin. It only irritates the skin if you put an oil on that's not needed. But when there's a wound or infection, then it's needed undiluted. It works so much better undiluted. I remember working with dog's paws. In the early days, I diluted it, and it helped the front paws, but not the back paws. And only when I sent it undiluted, the German chamomile, did the paws clear. So it needs to get into the dermal layers and begin to work. And if it's in a base oil, it sits on top of the skin, because that's where an essential oil is happy, in a fatty oil. I need it to get into the body and work either on the underlying muscles or under the you know, if it's a dog, the femoral artery, but they will lift their arm up, their leg up, if they want it on the femoral artery. So it's really fascinating. But yes, going back to your earlier question, is that so yes, I had the aromatherapist get very upset with me, but I quite enjoyed it, actually, maybe being able to stand up for the oils and give the oils a voice. You know, so not only am I giving the animals a voice, I'm saying how, yeah, I've never had an adverse reaction. You know, so why don't we look at these results and let's look at the positive things that can be achieved by working this way. And then, because I can now talk about the science behind what's happening, like with the wintergreen being metabolized more efficiently in animals anyway, I could explain to them, well, you know, why I was working as I was, or as I am. And then the next thing was the RCVS tried to close me down. So basically, they told me to take my website down. Anybody else I had trained, they were allowed to have their websites up, but I had to take all mine down, all my case studies down. I was told I couldn't sell wintergreen or birch. So I had to get a lawyer to say that, you know, animal welfare lawyer, to say how I worked is within the law, because I'm not working with veterinary medicines. I'm not diagnosing. The animal is selecting what's needed. It's working with enrichment to bring itself back into health. And also, you know, if I can say that horses, you know, who are injured very often select yarrow or green clay, for example. I can't say green clay cures wounds, and I can't say that yarrow cures wounds, because they're not veterinary medicinal products. But I could say that Simeo's wounds cleared and became non-infected when I applied green clay to them, and it, you know, and it inhibited the septicemia that they were concerned that she was coming down with. So, you know, it's how you word things as well. I can't diagnose, which is fair enough. You know, I'm not a vet, so I'm not diagnosing, but I'm seeing what's selected and what those oils do to give me a good idea to know, wow, they're selecting a lot of pain relieving oils. Oh no, they're actually selecting a lot of remedies that are known to support kidneys function. Yeah, dandelion root or sandalwood or juniper, or wow, they're selecting some really, you know, powerful remedies that sort the microbiome out in the gut, and you know, digestives like peppermint and fennel. So we can take that information. And so I got my website back up again, but I had to have it down for ages. And I just put up academic papers on zoopharmacognosy after that from Professor Hoffman, because they wouldn't let me put any of my stories up. And it was a great shame, because I'd had my rattlesnake bite story up there with my dog Gunner. And, you know, people were writing in saying that they did the same with their dogs who got bitten by rattlesnakes, and it worked for their dogs as well. So anyway, so my site went back up again. I don't know how long it was down, several months maybe, that I had to sort of fight my corner, and also to write and get wintergreen and birch back on the list again. So I not only had a lot of aromatherapists who still today will, you know, be upset, but, you know, it's surely the results are in the, you know, the proof is in the result. You know, you can see the result. And some vets will really embrace me, and other vets will really try and knock me off my my perch. And I can give you an example of a couple of vets who tried to do that, and one is very detrimental to today, till this day, and that's a skep vet. And that all came about because Karen Becker said that no vet should not have my training, because it's so instrumental in the welfare of animals. And he was furious. So he wrote, I haven't read it properly because it's so horrible. And it's been up there for years. And if you look up my name somewhere, the Skep Vet will come up pretty quickly, which is really, it's really quite detrimental, because if people are on the fence, they read what the Skep Vet says and they might believe it. And it's so, and I would have thought that's libelous, and he won't go into dialogue. He hasn't spoken to me. He's researched and seen none of my work. And yet he is damning it without any evidence. And surely that's very unscientific. Very unscientific. I had a very prominent person, and I'm not going to say his name, a very high-placed scientific person, who said to one vet that perhaps they should be a little bit more scientific and look at the work that I do. But science is about evolving, and it's about taking on new information. And you would have thought they'd be really excited to know what animals are doing to heal themselves. And a case in point, I was in Thailand, and I went to an elephant conference, and I slipped through the net because I had written this abstract, and so they thought I was a doctor. And I sort of, in my naivety, I hadn't realized. I just applied. And anyway, so I found myself in Thailand at this conference, incredibly naive, and they were all doctors or professors. And I thought, they're going to love my story about Sinia and how she healed herself from life-threatening conditions with garlic and green clay. And one of the professors was chatting to me a bit beforehand, and he said, what are you talking about? And I was like, how, a wounded elephant that responded incredibly quickly to what she selected. And he said, he's talking on wound healing as well. And he said, if they're lucky, it takes 3 months to heal an elephant's wounds, if they're lucky. Well, I thought they was going to be elated to show him that you can heal an elephant's wounds pretty much, good granulation tissue and healthy in 11 days. And in 6 weeks, the worst wound they had seen at the Sheldrick Trust, that's almost through to the spine, pretty much completely healed without scar in 6 weeks. So I got up on the stage, I had all the videos, I had the footage, I showed Sinia selecting the garlic, the green clay, the before and after, after 11 days, working with the vet, and then also the end result. And I was laughed off the stage, basically. They were furious that I was there. And I'd funded it all myself, obviously. And one American guy came up to me and said, "Do you realize you're the talk of lunch? They're absolutely furious that you're in this conference." And he said, "But if my animal was sick, I know who I'd take them to." Interestingly enough, the Indians who were at the and the Thai people who were at the conference, they were quite interested and would ask me questions afterwards, but it was more the Caucasians were so angry that I was there. So, and then unfortunately, civil war broke out just at that time. I couldn't get back, and we were all stuck in this hotel together. So I'd have to be stuck in the lift with them. And that's another story which will go in a different book, which is quite hair-raising, trying to leave Thailand. But yes, there's been lots of challenges along the way, and I was so determined. You say, what's the determination? I think because I really feel for anything and anyone that's suffering, and when you know how to alleviate suffering, you can't turn your back. How can I? What kind of person would I be if I turned my back when I have this knowledge and I walked away because the vets might not like it? It's the truth. And I think, if you know the truth, and if you know how to help any individual safely, then you have to speak that truth. And even if it takes beyond my lifetime before it becomes a way of life, and people are saying, "Oh, of course animals self-medicate, why would they do anything else?" Then it's worth it. It's been worth it anyway, because there's so many people now embracing it. So many animals are being helped. So it was an incredible journey. And on top of that, I was a single mother as well. So it was very difficult. I was very young. I came back from America, two small children and 2 suitcases, and began again. And so it was quite challenging. And, you know, I didn't really have a penny to my name at that point. So I would stay up all night and sort of research and work at night and look after the children in the day. So I was exhausted. I was exhausted for years. And just trying to sort of look after the children, take this work out there, and then deal with all the backlash that I was getting. So yeah, sometimes, you know, it was really, really, really tough. And very few people know how really tough it was to get this to the table. And then sometimes I would see the occasional student would, you know, go off with all their material, and instead of being sort of more of a team together, you would see that, you know, oh, they're sort of insinuating that they're the pioneers. And, you know, you're thinking, well, I've been through so much to try and get this on the table. And but then at the same time, it doesn't matter. You know, what people do, they're going to do. The most important thing is that I know the truth, and I know what I've done to help animals and alleviate their suffering as much as I can do within the means that I've got. You know, sometimes I would wish I was a vet or I had a PhD in something, because I think, you know, I could get this word, you know, people would listen to me more, people would hear me, you know. And the frustrating thing is sometimes Michael Hoffman will say to teams of people, you've got to get Caroline in on this program of self-medication. You know, she's done so much for self-medication, but because I'm not, because I don't have a PhD or doctorate, then they don't want to know. And I find that really difficult, that it doesn't matter that I've done more research than perhaps a PhD person on their particular subject. The fact, because I don't belong to a university, and even though I've got the results, it's been really difficult. So it's amazing how, you know, people are not looking at the results, it's more looking at the academic qualifications of the individual. And I mean, it's changing now, slowly, but I'm in my 60s now, so it's taken a long time from my 20s to get here. But yeah, at least it's here. Yeah, that's the main thing. And I'm really happy that people are taking it in every direction. And if they want to claim it and say, you know, it's theirs, that's fine. It's as long as it's out there. At first it was a little bit difficult to swallow, but I'm okay with that now. And just see the bigger picture, and it doesn't really matter. And yeah, so it's been an amazing journey too. So I've told you all the, you know, struggles and some of the difficult things, but I've had amazing journey as well. And people have been really positive, really supportive. Michael Hoffman, for one, he supported me from day one. He's a professor of zoopharmacognosy. Ian Redmond, who took over from Diane Fossey. She's Gorillas in the Mist, if you've come across that. Yeah, I've known Ian from a long time ago, and he's really supported my work. You know, he's even phoned Jane Goodall up to say, look, you've got to see what this person can do with primates. So I have had a lot of zoologists behind me, and Ian got me talking at Bristol University, and he works for the United Nations, and you know, so he's a prominent figure in the animal world. And do you want a bit of the backstory, how I met him?
Yes, please.
Because this is backstory stuff, isn't it?
Yes, I love it. I love my this.
Normal lectures. Sometimes I'm worried that I might have said too much.
No. I on behalf of all my listeners and fans of what you do, we love this. We are lapping it in. Trust me.
So Ian, okay, this goes back in the days of the 90s. Okay, when I was putting my courses together, and you know they were then getting really quite popular. I was in Hay and Y. And I'd overbooked a course. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? So there's too many students. I thought, maybe I can sort of divide it up So I called up this girl, Mary, who I vaguely knew just because my sister had homeopathic treatment with her and she was interested in the elephants at the Sheldrick Trust where I worked, the orphans. And so I called Mary up and I said, Mary, do you know anyone who, she worked for Born Free. I said, do you know anyone who could talk about how animals behave in the wild? And she said, yeah, I do actually. She said, Ian Redmond. And I said, do you think he'd lecture for me? And she said, yeah, but he's away at the moment. He's with the United Nations and he's whatever meeting they had going on. She said, but he'll be back for the ball. And I said, can anyone go to this ball? It was with Born Free. And she said, yeah. So I said, Mary, can you give me tickets? And I thought, gosh, how do you go to a ball by yourself? Because I'm a single mom, as you know. And I thought, anyway, she said to me, well, why don't we go together? And I thought, well, that'd be, yeah, great. So I drove down, met her on the A3, which is a main road in England to London in the south. And I parked my car at this hotel, big car park, jumped into her car with my jeans and t-shirt on and got up to the venue. And then sort of changed in this little cupboard. And I was totally out of date of what you meant to wear at a ball. And I had this long black dress, which all the sort of grandmothers were wearing. And there was Joanna Lumley there with her, gorgeous sort of half-length, very sort of flamboyant dress. And Graham Norton was there. And I was thinking, this is really awkward. How do you be at a ball and, not with anyone? So, there's only so much I could look at my phone or go into the bathroom or look at the things on the wall. And then suddenly Mary kept going. Mary was working behind the scenes, so that's why I wasn't hanging out with Mary, because she was a volunteer at Born Free. So she was sort of working behind the scenes, doing whatever she needed to do. And then she came rushing out and she was Ian Redmond. I introduced you to Ian Redmond. So I went out to see Ian Redmond and she introduced me as working with self-medication with the elephants in Kenya. And at that point, he was being introduced to the ambassador of Kenya and all her entourage of people. But he was so excited about the self-medication that he couldn't help, because you know how awkward it is when you're introduced to two people at the same time. And he couldn't help want to listen to my story. And anyway, they sort of marched off looking a bit perturbed. And I said to Ian, look, Ian, I'm by myself. So after a while, please feel free to mingle because I might just stand with you otherwise. And he said, he linked his arm into mine and he said, Caroline, be my guest. And then he introduced me to everybody as Caroline, but not his wife, Caroline, because his wife was called Caroline. And she wasn't there that evening. And he said, I just love the work that you do. He said, will you come and show me all your raw footage and come to lunch with my wife and myself? So I got all my raw footage together and went down and it was amazing. And now, as it happens, where I'm living, he lives literally just up the road from me. But, because we're both sort of Bristol, I wasn't Bristol to begin with, but then I moved to Bristol area. And so now, he has me talking about Bristol University, or he's got a primate club, and sometimes I talk at the primates club, or good presentations, be it in London, what can be achieved with primates. And then a vet in Czech Republic sort of got wind of what I did and invited me over for a lecture. And then I ended up working in the zoo in the Czech Republic, and that was amazing what I learned. Not amazing because I love zoos, believe me, I would have every animal living the life they were born to live and free and wild if I could, but that isn't the case right now. So being able to work with them and see what they needed to help alleviate any pain or suffering or enrich their environment was such a privilege. So the work began to expand into all different species, but there was so much synchronicity that it was almost beyond my control. And if you really want to know sort of a semi-beginning, because I always think, where is the beginning? Which part shall I go in on the journey? Because there's so many sort of major landmarks, really. And I think, if you really want to know the beginning, because I always think, where is the beginning? Which part shall I go in on the journey? Because there's so many sort of major landmarks, really. And I think, if you really want to know the beginning, because there's so many sort of major landmarks, really. But the very, very, very beginning was in California. Well, no, the very beginning is where I said when I realized you have to look after yourself in this world. And, you know, so to learn how to look after yourself and then your animals and your children. So another beginning, really, of the work I'm doing right now is in California. I suppose it's tricky to know how much to say, but anyway, I was in a sort of it's frustrating. Okay, I married a surfer, and he didn't. His finances were zero, and a father who's the exact opposite, and he had bought this house for my mother to stay in because he liked his free time in England, and leave it at that. And he was hoping my mother would spend more time. So this is my nice house in what was called Eltham Forest. My mother was very rarely there, but you know, there was a lot of stress from my father. I was quite young, my newborn child, and you know, when's he going to get a job? When's he going to start paying some money? And And he was almost, you know, in the same camp. He was always wanting to make money overnight, which doesn't happen. And I was a bit fed up with both of them, actually, because I decided they were both as, you know, as annoying each other with their attitude towards money. And so I decided to put it out to the world, not to the world, I put it out in a prayer. So this is a really private part of my life. I put it out as a prayer, but it was stronger than any prayer I've ever done. Or made, because it seemed to go on all night, and I didn't know if it was a dream. I didn't know if it was real. It was something quite different from anywhere or anything I'd ever done before. But it felt like I was wanting to give myself over as a nun, so to speak. As in, I basically said to the universe, to the greater good, to whatever is there, that I wanted to work for the wheel of the good, and to pay me how they wanted to. Yeah, I like nice things, but I don't have to have nice things. So I just couldn't see the point in just, you know, just making money for you. They seem like some people, you know, maybe taking it from my father, never seem to be fed, you know, and I just thought, what is the point? You know, there's so much that needs to be done on this planet. And I'd always sort of, my heart had always felt for you know, animals in rescue centres. You know, I just wished I could have had the money to have a shelter and you know, to be able to look after animals. But I guess if that had been the case, I wouldn't have been able to get to all the animals that I can get to now if I'd had a shelter, because I would have been just stuck in one place, I guess. And in America, I wouldn't have had the same voice, because it's difficult to have a voice of a new subject in such a big country. And so what happened is I put out this prayer, and then after that, something said I had to go back to England. And it was, you know, almost like a stone cold sort of feeling, you've got to go back. And I said to my husband, we got to go back to England. And he didn't want to go back. And I said, look, you know, it's really not working here. Not necessarily between us, but, you know, financially with him, everything he does doesn't seem to work out. And I said, let's go to where, you know, I understand life. And, you know, either we go and live in a surf shack where we had come from. We'd gone from a surf shack to this massive, great big multi-million house that belonged to my dad, you know, or the surf shack where we're actually quite happy. But I think living in the big house made him feel more inadequate. And it just, you know, things got broken down. So I said, look, we either go back to where we were, or we go back to England. And he said he would join me. I, you know, saved up the money, and I managed. It took me about 6 months, or maybe more, 9 months. And the last words he said to me was, "Look after mummy to my son Tom. Look after mummy till I get there," because he was going to join me later. He never came. Another story. And yeah, so suddenly I thought, what have I done? You know, I've left this beautiful big house, a very good-looking husband who did, you know, even though he was a surfer, he did turn a few heads. And I'm suddenly a single mum with 2 suitcases no money. My father actually has turned his back on me. So I have no support at all, because that's what he does sometimes, and he decided to do it. And I looked at, you know, the spirit world and, you know, whatever's there, and just said, you know, am I, you know, am I a joke? Because, you know, I've really had this strong pull to come back to England, and how can I work for you? How can I do this work when I have no money? I'm a single mother, and I'm not qualified in this, you know, so great. What can I do? And anyway, so he, and then that year was really the worst, probably one of the worst years of my life. In the respect was I've never felt so alone. And, you know, I didn't really fit into my old life that I had in England, because, you know, it was a completely different life. I changed in America too, probably looked at more spirituality and so on and so forth, but it was tough. But the one thing that kept me going, and it might seem a bit zany, but a month before I left California, my room lit up with light, and it was so strong, the light. And I said to I told a friend of mine, and she said, "What did it say?" And I said, "It didn't really say anything. It just was the most incredible love. You know, I've never known love like it." And that kept me going through the really tough times. And then after that, it seemed like I had a year of having to face, you know, no relationship. I'd always been in a relationship. You know, I always thought I had a safety net with my father or something. You know, no father anymore who was there. And it got even worse. He had a 5-bedroom house up the road, which he wouldn't let me stay in. And I was almost going to be put into a shelter. So it was getting bad. And every time I kept saying to the universe, it can't get much worse. It did. So I didn't dare say it can't get much worse anymore. And then it was almost like I had to not trust on anyone for money or love. I had to find that from another strength. And I had to, if I was going to work for them or do this work, you can cut this bit out if you want, because we're not live, are we? If I was going to do this work, I needed to be strong, you know. So then after about a year, all the most amazing synchronicities began to come together, like the most incredible spider web. And it was almost something else orchestrating my life that was incredible. And it took me up and out on the most amazing journey. And all I had to do was work with what was ever put before me. And it was incredible. Just like, you know, I'd another, do you want another synchronicity?
Yes, please.
Yep. Okay. So my son, my father did pay for private school for my kids, which was a bit of a joke. So here I am with no money and my children at private school, which didn't really suit. And so anyway, so he makes friends with the one person whose mother has a horse. Okay, and we're standing together, and she said, I hear you work with horses. And I didn't know anyone knew. So obviously Tom had told his friend, who was also called Tom, and his mum. And at that point, I had no idea of the English law, what was going on here, because I hadn't been in England for a long time. And I called up, I think it was Your Horse magazine, and I said, you know, could I put this ad in the paper, you know, what I do? She said, sounds really interesting. Can we do an article? So yeah, and then at that point, this other Tom's mum invited me over, and she was with a vet, Mark Elliott, and who was quite a well-known vet in Sussex. And she said, you must meet Mark. And Your Horse wanted an article on me, and so it began with the vet story with me working with Mark. So I can't remember the exact title. So my first article was with a well-known and respected holistic vet. Yeah, I couldn't have orchestrated that. And I remember going to a dinner party in London, and two of my very horsey friends said to me, you must meet, try and get to know Mark Elliott. And I was thinking, how would I get to know Mark Elliott? You know, I didn't even know where he was. It was another part of England. But anyway, so that, and then see, all the synchronicity kept happening. So then one little girl wrote to me from the article, and she said, can you help my horse? He's had laminitis for 18 months, and was it 18 months? 18 weeks, sorry, 18 weeks. And I feel that if he lays down, he'll never get up again. And so I sent remedies off in the post, never even saw the horse, gave her instructions. The horse was sound in a week. The horse was declared sound by the vet in 2 weeks. And I thought that was it. You know, didn't hear anything else. And, you know, trying to get this work sort of known and trying to do as much work as I could. And then I got a phone call from Hilton Herbs, which is a big sort of horse herbal company in England. And they said, we actually were watching the horse that got healed with the oils. Do you mind if I write about it in my book? I said, yeah, no, I'd love you to, fantastic. And then she said, well, would you come around with us to all our shows, you know, the major horse shows, and talk about the oils? So I'd go to Burley, Stoney, all the major horse shows. And then they had a vet there as well, Tim Cousins, who was their homeopathic vet. And then I became good friends with Tim. And then, so he became friend and colleague. And it was just always the synchronicity, you know, that was almost like I couldn't have woven it together. And there were a lot of people in the early days with sort of, you know, who were sort of married to vets or in a much better situation to me to take this work forward, but it would never last. And it just seemed to always come back to me, leading the way. And it's almost as if it's, you know, there's something else that is a driving force. So there's me with my passion, but it's mixed with something that makes this incredible synchronicity to take it where it needs to be. Because sometimes I do get frustrated thinking, you know, as I said earlier, you know, I wish I had academic qualifications to get this out far and wide. But then you look at Culpeper, and, you know, he took it to the general public, and, you know, it took his sort of medicines took a life of their own. So it's, you know, and working with the elephants was amazing. You know, Daphne Sheldrake was really into alternative medicine. So I didn't have to go through a board of trustees to, you know, work with the elephants. You know, she embraced it. And again, that was sort of, you know, how that happened was pretty amazing too. It was a missed conversation. I thought through somebody else that she wanted me to be over there with the elephants. And so I went over with Tom, stayed in a really poor area of Africa, of Kenya, and got this terrifying taxi ride every morning, which was about an hour, which used to drive up on the curb and down again to go to the Sheldrake Trust. Anyway, we went there. I definitely said, well, you can't have more than an hour with my elephants. And I said, well, I'm going to need more than an hour if you really want, you know, to do the work and to be able to really find out what they need. So she said, well, come over. So I came over. I thought, gosh, I've obviously got some really, you know, cross line going on here. So anyway, I thought, well, maybe we'd just have to spend the rest of, you know, our stay there on a safari or something. And anyway, I went there, and, you know, Daphne, you know, came along, and her daughter Angela said, who's this person? And anyway, so she took me in to see little Shimba, who was my first love. And Shimba had lost his mum because her trunk had been cut off by a trap and she couldn't feed herself, so she died of starvation, and he was found suckling on her. And he was very reclusive. He didn't really mix with anyone, people or other elephants. And anyway, I went into the stable and I started working with him, and he's on my first film, and he on my webinars, and he came and put his he sat on my lap basically, and from then Daphne just took me on board. So I was out of my sort of my lodgings in a really sort of rundown area, I'm suddenly now staying next door to her with her friend. I'm driven in every morning with the driver, and then called back after that to help with other elephants that need help. And it was amazing. I would say Africa was probably, I could say one of the highlights of my entire life. And I've done a lot of amazing things, but it was surreal. It was beautiful working there. It was, it's everything. It was just everything felt so pure. And the vet was amazing to work with. He embraced it so much that it allowed me the freedom to get the results we needed, because he backed me all the way. So I wasn't having to sort of prove it to him. I would just call him up if I needed advice and say, okay, look, the wound's looking like this. Do you think we can, get away with cleaning it for another day because the cleaning is so stressful? And he'd say, yeah, okay, I'll come and check it out tomorrow or something. So, I was in constant conversation with him. And when he saw the results, he said, yeah, the remedy saved her life. So, Africa was amazing. And it was, and then I used to treat, which I don't tell many people as well, I had their office. So afterwards I used to treat the keepers, and they used to line up outside the hut. And I used to, if they had stomach aches or whatever, I used to dish them out little herbal remedies of essential oils, and they could feel how they felt with it and how it helped them. And so it helped them help the elephants.
I can't believe how blessed I am to have this conversation with you, to listen to your stories, because I'm on a path myself right now, and I have been asking questions to the universe. Mm. And when you talk about synchronicities and saying prayers out there, you have no idea how much it touched me here, listening to all this, because I really believe in the work you do. Mm-hmm. And the magic of it all, the beauty of the oils. And I just can't help but think, who is Caroline? Because you have a very intuitive soul, and the more I listen to your story, I just, I'm just in awe, because you're a sensitive person. Mm-hmm. You're very gentle. And were you like this when you were a child?
Yes, I think so. Yes, I think I was. It's difficult to remember.
Because for the animals to trust you just like that, you must give off a certain vibration, a certain energy yourself for the animal to really want to go to you, to trust you completely.
I think it's because they know that I've got something to heal them, and it's unconditional. There is, when I was really, really poor, and I would do treatments or my classes, I would never, ever dream of counting, they can only have that little bit of body cost because it costs that much money. They can have, in my sessions, any animal that, if they come in and work with my remedies, or if I'm in a classroom, regardless, if I have money or not, I wouldn't dream of ever putting in my head of anything monetary when I work with them. All what I have is they can have what they need, because ultimately it doesn't really belong to me. It belongs to the universe. And if I withhold anything that they need to heal themselves, I believe this work would be taken away from me. It's because I know in my deep heart that it doesn't necessarily belong to me in like a child it's my child, but at the same time you allow that child to grow, and you can't there's something else that controls this work, and it feels like they control it through me. And for as long as I believe that I try and hear, and I try and work within a moral compass, that that the work is with me. Because so many times I've thought, why me? Why not choose somebody who's married to a vet, or who has got a PhD, or is a vet themselves, or who has loads of money and can have a beautiful healing center, and all of that. So I'd many times I thought, why choose me? I'm not an academic, even though I love learning the pharmacology of the subject, and I'm passionate about understanding how the oils work in the body, and the pharmacokinetics, and private training and intuition and all of that, just not under a university banner, but to university standards. So I didn't turn my back on spirituality. I had to really, at some point, put it to the side. I had called my company originally Entrepawneur, that was his original name, but I needed to go really mainstream. I needed to really study the academic side of this work, and I really needed to put it into an academic structure, and I had to step away from anything esoteric, because I wanted the mainstream to see it for the subject it really was, or really is, that it's a science, and it's very similar to pharmaceutical medicine, other than it's natural and it works in harmony with the body. And I didn't want it to be thought of airy-fairy. So I kind of left that side of me behind. And it's only now, when I feel that it's got its own momentum and it's, going really well, that I can now take a step back and then revisit, the other side of me.
Yeah. But
that makes sense.
Yeah, but that, that's real life. That's something that I think anyone listening will be able to identify with that, because we have to make hard choices. And I want to thank you, because you've opened up yourself and you shared such private stories, and I'm deeply honored that you chose to share them with me. Like I said, I think somehow, like I said, the universe is synchronicities. It's something is happening. I can't explain it. And listening to you is it's just beautiful. And you were talking about how you touched on your family a bit. The relationship with your father was not easy. I can sort of actually identify with that, because my relationship with my family is not easy. I'm not really on speaking terms with my father either at this point in time. And I chose to walk away from the security of the family, to do something. And I wasn't even sure what the hell I'm doing. Still, if you ask me today, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just know that that something is calling me, and I just have to trust that it will lead me somewhere, and it's led me to the oils, it's led me to my rescue work, the animals. And like I said, Dr. Melissa Shelton, and then I got to know about your work as well. And listening to this today, it's like, I don't know what is it, but it's like a light is going up, around me right now, and guiding me. And somehow it's like almost a sign saying that I'm on the right path, even though I have no idea where I'm going still, but I am being guided in the right direction. Just listening to your story and what you've shared.
Well, I think, the same, when I came back to England, and actually I arrived back on April Fool's Day, and I thought, oh God, this is a sign. But, now I look back, and my life was built on sand in California. Yes, the husband looked good. Yes, the house was amazing, you know, it's pool and 80 avocado trees, but they belonged to my father. He would take it away whenever he wanted, which he did anyway, and turn his back on me whenever he chose, because that's what he does. And you know, so when I was really needing help, when I had 2 young children and almost in a shelter, I managed to get away from that scenario. Just and he had a 5-bedroom house up the road, farmhouse, empty, and he wouldn't let me stay in it with his grandchildren. So, you know, and I remember thinking, but, you know, spiritually, I was looked after every time, you know, but I had to, it's almost like I had to face my fears. I had to get strong. I had to, and I didn't know my journey, you know. Yes, I had done this work, but I didn't know if it was going to take off. You know, I'd given up, you know, the one thing I was trained in years ago was cordon bleu cooking, but I became vegan. So, you know, I couldn't, the one thing I was trained in, I couldn't do anyway, because I didn't believe in eating meat. And so, yeah, it was just devastating. I thought, wow, you know, my life is totally over, you know. But, you know, after, I remember about 6 months in, I thought, but my life was built on sand. And I do remember, this is very spiritual now, but I do remember one time my car broke down, and I came home. It's the first time I've ever sort of lived by myself, and, you know, not being surrounded with either friends or, yeah, I went to boarding school, so I'm always used to being around people. And, you know, but I felt so alone. And I remember I finally got home and I thought, nobody would have ever known if I got home. Would anybody have ever cared? It was a very devastating feeling. And I remember just put the kids to bed, and I remember just laying down on the floor, sort of meditating. And I remember the tears coming down my cheeks. And I remember just, I was thinking, I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. And I just said to what appears like a Christ-like person, you know, I'm not in any formal religion, more spirituality. Yes, I believe in Christ, perhaps not to all the, you know, all the different examples of the things, but just as a raw, you know, somebody who is, you know, behind the scenes. And, you know, I just said to this Christ-like person, can you hold my hand? Because I didn't want to ask for help anymore. I just said, can you hold my hand? Because I needed strength. And my right hand, I remember going really hot. So that was the second thing, other than the light. And that gave me strength, because I had no idea where I was going. I had nothing at all, other than this one little girl I'd helped with her horse. And it took a whole year before. And then I thought, you know, I just thought, I know I'm going to go and live where poor artists and writers live. So they're sort of similar, and they have similar likes and dislikes as me. And I won't feel so, you know, I won't feel so out of place. I didn't fit in anymore into the world I'd once known, because I couldn't do anything. So I moved to Hay-on-Wye, which is where there's a lot of writers and artists. And it was great. You know, I took my children out of private school and I put them in state school. So there were other mums there who could help me look after the kids, because you can share. So I could work and I could, you know, do my courses and things like that. And then from there, I moved to Hay, and it was a lot of fun. The children loved it. It was very magical there. And just things just kept getting stronger and stronger, from good. And I just thought, whoa, you know, this is pretty amazing here. And then it was time to move to Bristol. I think that was around 2000. And the work really exploded. I had Horse World, 160 horses. People were embracing the work, you know, and it was really getting from strength to strength to strength. I was learning more and more about the animals, the best ways to work, how to get the best results in the shortest amount of time. My son, who's a scientist and a researcher, he actually then was able to come on board, and he studied self-medication and wanted to do a PhD in it, but they said it was too diverse, you know, the subject that he presented to them. And he's awarded all these, you know, incredible prizes, even at university, so he's pretty high up in his deal, and basically he came up with the theory of self-medication, how it all works based on chalk appetites, wrote a couple of books on it, taught me everything I needed to know about pharmacology, pharmacokinetics. So he was my private teacher, and he's still there on the phone if I need to get him to research something deeper. But he's doing amazing work in Australia at Queensland University at the moment. But yeah, so you know, it was amazing how the journey's taken me, really. Can't remember, I've gone off track there.
Well, no, you know, it's just amazing because each time you felt like almost like a dead end, like, you know, and you just asked for help or support, you know, and when you got your sign, it bolstered you up and gave you that extra fuel to push on, you know. Yeah. And I'm just,
but when things went bad, you kind of know, like, even though it was really tough my first year in England, because I'd never lived alone, you know, left all this, you know, beautiful, wow, walking out of a multi-million, well, you know, well over £1 million house into income support, that's quite, and I left it all behind, voluntary. I just packed my bags and left the house. And this, you know, he was incredibly good-looking husband. So to just walk out with faith and then have a really tough time for the first year, I thought, whoa, this is a big challenge, you know. I never dreamt it would have taken me here. And it has been the most incredible journey. And it would never have worked in America if I had tried to begin it, because America's too big. Whereas here, there was one magazine, you know, or there's, what, 5 different horse magazines. Everybody gets to see it pretty much. Your Horse, you know, Horse and Hound, or, you know, whichever magazine. There's a certain amount of dog magazines. It's easy to get the subject to grow in a smaller country. Whereas America, it would have got lost. And it's, you know, quite tough in America as well, you know, getting new things out there. So I had to be back in England, but I think the messages, because I want to write a book on it, sort of adventure, synchronicity, and also, you know, what you can achieve. You know, you can achieve a new science without even, you know, being qualified in that science, and with no money and as a single mother. It's possible to do it because I did it. And yeah, I lecture to vets now. Sometimes I'm the only non-vet at conferences. You know, very often people call me Dr. Caroline, and I enjoy it for a day or two before I have to say I'm not a doctor.